So welcome everyone. It would be great to tell us in the chat where are you joining us from. So we know from which countries we have, because I know in our webinars we have people from all over.
Absolutely.
So Argentina, Nicosia, Lebanon, Greece, India, excellent. Argentina, nice. Okay, so to make sure that we start on time and leave on time as promised, so I would like to welcome you. We'll be starting now. So I would like to welcome you to our second ICF Cyprus chapter webinar. And as the board member leading the events and training committee of ICF Cyprus chapter, it's my honor to host you today's sessions. We're going to explore an essential topic in coaching, which is the importance of assessment. And this is, you will know, and Firas, our amazing speaker, will explain to you how assessments are a powerful tool in the coaching process, because they not only provide objective insights into client strength, but areas for development and behavioral patterns, but by incorporating them, you create a more personalized strategies. And for those who don't know me, I am Pauline Sawaya. I'm a people business enabler, business coach, and neuroencoding specialist. And 1 second to admit, I've been in coaching for so many years, and I'm passionate about helping people and businesses reach and swift shift to their wildest dreams. And before I introduce Firas, I would love if you really keep your cameras on to make it interactive, so we see you and we see your lovely faces and smiles. We will keep the questions till the end, where Firas, anyways, Firas is going to make a very interactive presentation. So we will keep the questions till the end. And now I'm going to introduce Firas Al-Banna, who's our speaker today. He's a Lebanese-Canadian professional development facilitator. He's a coach and mentor, actively working in the field of corporate training since 1998. He was born and raised in... Hold on. I don't know. Okay, now. Okay, can you hear me well now? Yes? Okay, excellent. So he was born and raised in the Middle East, and he often incorporates his knowledge and experience to the particular intricacies of the regions. For almost 3 decades, he partnered with 50+ organizations in the MENA, enabling their growth through bespoke individual and leadership development solutions. He leverages Hogan's psychometric analysis and strategic insights to build training programs that deliver measurable results. So this is a short introduction about Firas. Firas, the floor is yours. So let's dig into what assessments are, and I welcome everybody who joined us now as well. And Firas, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Pauline. It's a pleasure to be here, everyone. And thank you for this kind introduction. So again, my name is Firas Banna. 25+ years in the field of learning and development, as a trainer, as a coach, as a mentor, and for the past 9 years as a psychometric assessor as well. Basically, when we started talks with Pauline in regards to this presentation, The main focus that we discussed was to try and introduce the value of psychometric assessments to coaches in particular, in order for them to understand what tools are available in the market, what's the science behind psychometric analysis, what tools can be used, and how you can actually benefit from them as coaches within your respective fields. Now, naturally, there are lots and lots of tools out there, and part of what we will be talking about is what the science is behind these tools in order to establish the credibility of psychometrics in the first place. And then we're going to go ahead and focus on one of the tools that we at Phoenix Consulting actually do offer. Now, just a brief introduction of Phoenix Consulting. We are a boutique HR firm that was established in Beirut approximately 12 years ago. And we currently have offices in Saudi Arabia, in Oman, in Dubai, in Egypt, and in Canada. So we operate on a national, regional basis. We have a large client database where we offer all kinds of psychometric assessments, consulting services, HR restructuring, training and development, coaching services. So very diverse kind of culture. Now, naturally, we all like PowerPoint presentations. So I do have a presentation that I will be sharing right now on the screen, but naturally, most of the information is going to come from me. So my style and delivery is mostly visual. But naturally, please feel free to ask questions, whether you want to post them on the questions or the chat box, or if you feel you want to interject, by all means, please raise hands and ask the question that you have. So let's start with a very quick hand-raising exercise. Let me see here what kind of coaches do we have. So if you are primarily into executive coaching, can you please just raise your hand so I can see how many of the group is primarily into executive coaching? Okay. Okay, not many. Okay. So I'm assuming the rest are a mix between life coaching, executive, lifestyle coaching, medical, and that's fine. Excellent, because the science behind psychometrics is so diverse and yet so robust that it can actually benefit all kinds of. And the beauty of psychometrics is that depending on the purpose of your coaching session, you're able to actually select the tool that fits the most. So let me go ahead and put my presentation up. Okay. Let's go ahead and share. Okay. So again, the main purpose, the main value of our presentation today is to actually provide you with an insight into what psychometrics are, and primarily how you can actually utilize them within your coaching careers and your coaching businesses. So very, very quick agenda. We're going to look at an introduction of psychometrics, the science behind them, how they work out, the different type of psychometric tools that we have, the statistical analysis that occurs behind the scenes. We're going to look at what we call identity versus reputation in terms of personality assessments specifically. We're going to look at how this can be a benefit for you. So the what's in it for you factor, how you can progress and supplement your coaching journeys with your clients in order to maximize their benefits. And finally, we're going to look at one of the tools that we at Phoenix Consulting are the strategic representative of in the Middle East, Hogan. I am the master facilitator of Hogan in the Middle East, in the MENA region. So I deliver the certification programs for people who wish to be Hogan certified, as well as being an assessor myself who uses the tool in pretty much journey as well as the training. So let's look at psychometric assessments and give an introduction. So another hands-up exercise. Who here is familiar, at least from a very introductory aspect of psychometrics, has learned about them, has some kind of basic awareness, basic information on them? Okay. Okay, so not many. Okay. So basically, psychometrics is, as the name implies, so derived from the vernacular of psychology. Psychometrics is the study of associating our psychological and neurological abilities in order to understand certain aspects of an individual. Now, I'm sure you are all familiar with the dilemma that companies have between IQ and EQ, or emotional quotient, based on the emotional intelligence factor. And this is really where psychometrics have really gained momentum. Ever since studies on emotional intelligence and EQ have gained momentum in the 80s and 90s, more and more effort has been placed into psychometric analysis, whereby lots of researchers basically spend time into understanding how do our personalities, how do our abilities, our neurological abilities, whether, again, but this is a discussion for the ages. There are two schools of thought. One says you're born with it. One says you gain it and it changes and switches throughout your life. But basically, how do our abilities and our personality behaviors and tendencies actually can affect the way we behave, whether on a personal perspective or the professional perspective, and what does that relationship perspective or an occupational one. Now, some of you or most of you might be familiar with some of the very early tools of psychometrics. So you might be familiar with the Myers-Briggs type indicator, referred to as MBTI. So this one is one of the very early models. Another model that is extremely popular as well is the DISC model, DISC. With the DISC model, you get a kind of representation as to certain aspects of your personality. There are others as well. There's the Ned Herman model based on the whole brain theory. So there are lots of tools out there that some are as old as 60 years old, and some are as new as a few years only. So it is a field that continues to be researched, that continues to be updated. In fact, even Hogan, which was established in the mid-80s with research behind it going back all the way to the 60s, even though they are well established, they continue to actually research personality, because we're all familiar with how things are changing on a very, very quick basis, whether it is socially, economically, politically, or even technologically. So this is a very quick sort of overview into the history of psychometrics and why it was it has become popular. And again, it's usually psychologists that start with this kind of research. And as time started to shed more light onto the importance of using these assessments to understand personality and understand abilities, the business world has responded, right? So businesses have started to recognize the value of these psychometrics into their organizational development cycle. And what we notice is that whether you are starting at the recruitment phase, so at the very, very beginning of interacting with individuals, all the way throughout their cycle into development, into promotions, into succession planning, even into personal development on the individual side, businesses have recognized the importance of psychometrics. And as such, this is what really gave momentum to its birth. Now, psychometrics are pretty much divided into two types. What we refer to as the ability part of psychometrics and the personality side of psychometrics. Now, abilities refer to primarily the major types of IQ abilities that we understand. So we have numerical abilities, we have verbal and communication type abilities, we have what we call abstract or logical abilities. For any of you who have done some of these online IQ tests, these are where they present you with certain shapes in order, and then they ask you to guess the next shape into the sequence. So these would be what are called logical or abstract abilities. There are also subcategories behind these three major categories that branch into what they call error checking ability. So people that either proofread or deal with numbers a lot usually can go through these types of assessments. There are comprehensive abilities. There are certain abilities that relate to engineering, to technological work, some that relate to administrative, organizational work. So the field is really very, very wide when it comes to these abilities tests. These abilities tests are primarily used at a very early stage, whether in the development stage or development field or the recruitment field. So if you're working with a client that is trying to develop their abilities within these respective areas in order to enter a job or even at the university level, these types of psychometrics can actually be used in order to shed light on, for example, what kind of jobs might best suit them, what kind of functionalities might suit them very well. So, and I know this from myself. My bachelor degree is actually in science. I have a bachelor's of science in physics and math. And that was simply because when I was a kid, I excelled in the maths and sciences. And I thought that you either could be an engineer or a doctor when I was growing up, being good in the sciences and math. And later on, I got into training and delivery. But and this is one of the things that EQ and emotional intelligence has shed light on in terms of IQ versus EQ. And Daniel Goleman actually mentioned this in his book, saying that IQ can determine what field you can enter into, but EQ actually determines the prospect of success. And this is really the exact same principle. So with ability stats, you can actually implement that either with young adolescents, young adults, trying to determine what kind of fields they want to enter, or even with professionals, with people that wish to improve the prospects of their careers, of their professions, to try and understand where their abilities actually are. Now, like I said, this is a very specific type of psychometric, and it is more related towards IQ. Now comes the second part, and the second part relates to personality assessments. And this is where the innovation and the bulk of the research is actually taking place into understanding the complexity of our personalities, the complexity of how our personalities change in different times, whether you are within your environment, within a comfort zone, whether you are in a danger, a learning zone, whether you're stressed out or not, and the types of people that you ultimately deal with. So since the 60s and 70s, there has been some research into how our personality can actually affect the prospects of our success. And Robert Hogan, who launched the Hogan tool, who we'll be talking about later on, is one of the pioneers actually that started within this domain. And basically, again, it was all driven by psychologists, primarily occupational psychologists, that wanted to understand, again, what is the impact of our personality on our daily lives. Now, from my perspective as an executive coach and a trainer, I deal mostly with psychometrics from the occupational side. But psychometrics can also be dealt with in terms of developing various personal goals, overcoming challenges, even dealing with certain aspects that relate to what we call the dark side or the negative side of personality, where we might be under the influence of our amygdala, our emotions, being stressed out, being under danger or threat, or the appearance of danger and threat within our environment. So despite the fact that I might actually talk about this primarily from an occupational standpoint, from your perspectives as well, for those of you who are more on the life coaching or relationship coaching aspect, the same can be said in terms of your clients. And again, at the end of the day, it is a matter of being able to select the right tools. So hopefully within this brief webinar, we'll be able to understand how to look for the right tool that will give you the results that you need. Now, in order to understand the benefit of psychometrics, we really need to understand a little bit how psychometric assessments work. And this applies both to the abilities part as well as the personality part of psychometrics. So the field of psychometrics is pretty much driven by statistical analysis. Now, some of you might be familiar with the bell curve model, which is used in so many different fields. And it basically describes how various population segments actually exist. So, for example, in technology, there's something called the law of propagation or law of diffusion of technology, where you try and understand how people actually get excited about trying out new technologies. And they use the same concept, the bell curve, where we have the extremes, where one extreme is the early adopters, the other extreme is late adopters, and then we have the bulk of people in the middle. So with psychometrics, what they do is that they look at a segment of the population and they implement various rules into selecting that segment. And those rules really depend on the type of assessment that they're looking after. So these are what they call known groups. And if we look at the word known, this basically explains that bulk section at the middle of the bell curve, where we find that the majority of people exist, right? So for example, under the occupational development models, most employees in any company will meet the expectations that are put for them in terms of their objectives, in terms of the key performance indicators, their goals, so on. Same pretty much applies for people on their personal lives. Most people live in a way where they are able to manage in a good enough manner. Now, from an occupational point of view, we call that meeting expectations. And on the edges, on the extremes, we have the endings, the various endpoints of this model. So we have the people that are going to be generally exceeding those expectations, exceeding the performance or the expectations that are set upon them from a occupational standpoint or from a relational standpoint. And then we have the other extreme, where we have people that don't necessarily perform extremely well. And again, if you look at the business field, you'll find that the number of CEOs, the number of entrepreneurs is quite limited compared to the number of people that are employees. They might be very successful employees, but they might not necessarily have the ability or capability to actually function well as entrepreneurs or CEOs. Same on the other end. We have the people that don't necessarily have the abilities or capabilities to actually function as employees. So the science behind psychometrics is to determine, like I said, a group of or a section of the population that they wish to take as the norm, as the group that is going to be the benchmark for everybody else. And then they have people go through the assessment tool that they have designed, and then they compare the people that have taken the assessment with the people within this norm. Now, let me start by explaining how that works on the ability side, because it makes a little bit more sense on the ability side. So on the norm group front of an abilities test, let's say, for example, we're doing a numerical ability psychometric assessment, and we want to determine what this person's ability is going to be. Now, I'm sure you guys have heard about the stereotype of how Chinese are particularly excelling in the maths, especially in the United States, to the extent that major corporations have been trying to include more diverse recruiting initiatives. But basically, with an abilities test in numerical ability, you look at a segment and you say, okay, I'm going to compare everyone that's going to take this assessment with this segment of the population. And based on how each individual scores on this assessment, they look at how that norm group has scored, right? So again, looking at the bell curve, let's say they have a norm group of 10,000 people, and the majority of people will be scoring in the average zone, and minorities will be on the extremes. They look at the people who undergo the assessments, and they compare their results with the results of this group. So for example, if they have a test or an assessment of 100 questions, and they get, let's say, 60% of it correctly, that 60% will put them in the bulk of the average zone. So this person, compared to this particular norm group, would be considered an average person in terms of their numerical ability. Okay? Does that make sense in terms of how they compare people to people? Because that's really the science behind psychometrics. Okay? So the basic rule in psychometrics is that it's not an academic test where you pass or you fail. It really depends on the norm group that you're being compared with. So for example, back in 2005, the company that I was working for at the time was using abilities tests for their employee development. And at the time, there was a limited number of norm groups created for the MENA region. So the one that we were using at that time was referred to as Saudi Arabian fresh graduates. Okay, so the norm group consisted only of people who are fresh university graduates who come from Saudi Arabia, and that's who everybody was being compared to. Now these days, the number of tools has expanded a lot, and the norm groups that they have created, that these companies and these tools have created and researched for these different assessments have also increased. So you'll be able to find many different norm groups relating to Europe, various age groups, various educational backgrounds, experiential backgrounds, even sectors, industries, that will help you in what we call comparing apples to apples. So again, from an occupational standpoint, if your client or your candidate is looking at professional development, you're able to utilize that norm group and that assessment to say to this person, hey, this is where you stand in terms of your peers, in terms of people who are in a similar situation as you are. And going a little bit backwards into our objectives for the day, the what's in it for you factor, this is really where it's going to come handy for you, because it gives you a head start as to where this person exists. So if we go back to the GROW model, for example, this can be a very good head start for the realities aspect, right? You would know exactly where this person's reality is from an abilities perspective. So that way you're able to actually say, okay, this is where you are. In order to excel, you're going to have to actually raise your abilities by X. Let's look at what you can do to actually accomplish that. So it gives you that push to the front. So that's the abilities aspect. And like I said, abilities is more concrete. It's IQ based. The options for development are very much very straightforward, because they're primarily on the academic side. The interesting story comes on the personality side. And this is because, again, our personalities are so complex that there isn't one school of thought here that just prevails and is the one and only. So, for example, under the Hogan school of thought, we consider something called reputation, not identity. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later. In another tool, they consider identity versus reputation. Another school of thought will consider testing you under different situations. So they will give more of a situational questionnaire. Another school of thought will say, no, let's put this person, let's test them twice, once as they are in the workplace and once as they are in the personal environment. So lots of schools of thought here, but they all primarily go towards identifying various personality tendencies that we engage in, whether at the professional level or the personal level. This is an example that I like to give a lot. Whether or not you are social, the old and somewhat archaic idea that extroverts are more successful in the workplace was really put under a lot of scrutiny during the COVID time. So this is something that I said to all of my introverted friends. You know, COVID allowed the introverts to actually shine, because working from home, you didn't have to actually show or attempt to show a strong sociable nature. You could very well be in the comfort of your own bedroom, and you're only going to be judged or assessed based on your results. Whereby when people go to work every day, usually it's the extroverts that can shine a little bit more. So with psychometric assessments, you're able to identify whether a certain personality tendency actually works for the person or against the person. And again, this is one of the things that makes it such a strong tool, in that there are no right or wrong answers in personality assessment. So you could have somebody that is an extrovert and somebody that is an introvert, and both of them can display great results compared to a certain job, or taking into consideration a certain goal that they're trying to achieve. So you would be able to pinpoint the actual challenge that is facing a person, instead of being blindsided by some of the things that we see on a regular basis. For example, the ability to be extroverted in nature, in your relationships. Another one is the ability to be disciplined and focused versus the ability to think outside the box, right? Both of them are great attributes in different situations. So personality assessments will allow you to be able to understand what areas are acting as the challenges or the barriers, so to speak, for a certain person. And again, this will give you a great head start into identifying what their challenges are, what the reality is, in order to actually move forward with their coaching. So if we were to look at the science of personality specifically and understand how that works, well, basically through research, we've seen that personality is real. The differences that occur in people are merely differences that are consistent in behavior. So despite one person being different than another, that person, so individual A, will generally function the same consistent way in most situations based on their personality. And person B will similarly behave in the similar fashion based on most situations. Again, going back to the bell curve and understanding the bulk of situations. There are tools out there that will give you an insight into what happens when people are frustrated or people are passing through difficult times as well. So we know that personality is real, but people are actually consistent. So this allows us to actually predict typical behavior from people. Again, this can be used as an advantage for the person to work with it rather than working against it. Another aspect that is also very critical in terms of personality is that due to the fact that a lot of research has been put into this area, you're able to apply it into very consequential life outcomes. So whether we're talking about your health, your marital, personal relationships and satisfaction, your occupational performance. I once got a question if a coach was able to use psychometrics for marital counseling. Now, yes, they can be, but there are certain things that you need to consider because rather than think about it in terms of identifying an ideal partner, you can use it to identify the areas of difference and the areas of similarity between two personalities and see how they can function with each other to reach that type of a successful relationship. So those personality psychometric assessments can really have major consequences on the success and the well-being of others. And again, this is the bulk of our objectives as coaches. And on another front as well, from a leadership perspective, again, through research, through validated studies, leadership development has been almost primarily associated with EQ rather than IQ. Like Daniel Goleman said, yes, IQ helps you understand what fields you can actually enter into, but once you are actually within that field, it is a different ball game. It's not really up to IQ anymore because your IQ is pretty much going to be very, very similar to others within the field that you're in or within the function that you're in. And as such, IQ will have no real predictable power towards your success. Okay. Now, any questions so far? I know I've been, going through this in a speedy fashion, but if anybody has any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer. Oh, I see there's lots of stuff on the chat. Anything, any questions on the chat, Pauline? Vineet, you can ask your questions anytime.
Okay, please raise your hand and then we can take the questions. Vineet had a question. Vineet, do you want to ask your question now?
Yeah, I can do that. Thank you.
Please.
So the question was, you spoke about multiple different tools. That was very helpful. Are there specific tools recommended for specific coaching situations or different contexts, or each one of these tools is applicable across all the situations?
No, that's primarily the main point behind any successful implementation of a psychometric assessment. You really need to understand what your end result is going to be in order to select the right tool, right? So yes, there are certain tools that work primarily for coaching purposes. There are tools that work primarily for development purposes. There are tools that focus more on the relational aspect, on the personal aspect, and there are others that focus on the occupational aspect. Now, most tools rather than just focus on one aspect or the other, what they do is they try and be diverse within the reports that they generate. So the actual report that you request, based on the results of the person's assessment criteria, will actually present you with the information that you need in terms of coaching. So in Hogan, for example, there are certain tools that are primarily used for coaching. So they will present the various challenges. They will even suggest certain questions to ask the individual, shed light on any blind spots that might be there. So absolutely, it's that is really the most important aspect, is to understand the tool that you need to work with and the report that that tool is actually providing you with, in order to fully take advantage of it from the coaching perspective. Does that answer your question, Vinny?
No, it does. Thank you.
Excellent, excellent. Any other? All good so far? Okay, good. At least I'm not losing anybody, so that's always a good sign.
No, no,
okay.
no. Everybody is still here.
Excellent, excellent. Okay, so this is really the bulk of the science behind psychometrics, right? So, and again, you're not really at any need to understand more than that, right? Now, depending on what tool you utilize, and by the way, some tools will have a prerequisite of you being certified in that tool to be able to use it. And some tools will say, no, that's fine. You can just purchase the tool from us, purchase the assessment for the candidate. They undergo the assessment. We generate the report for you, and that's it, right? So again, depending on what tool you're using here, you might actually need to inquire further in terms of the assessment criteria. For Hogan, you actually have to be certified in the Hogan interpretation in order to be able to generate the reports for your candidates. So this is really the bulk of what you need to understand in terms of the science behind it. Now, let's speak specifically as to how this can actually benefit you in your coaching careers and in pushing your coaching businesses and perspectives even further. First of all, the unique selling propositions that coaches usually associate themselves with is the ability to facilitate change and confront the person with an unbiased reality that can be used towards executing that change. That is primarily how we like to sell ourselves as coaches, right? We're drivers of change, but the change naturally needs to come from that person. So being able to come to our candidates with a scientifically validated tool, something that is extremely unbiased, extremely non-judgmental, non-determinal as well, because a lot of psychometrics, you'll notice that in the report languages that they use, they never speak in what is called a language of certainty. Rather, they speak in a language of predictability. So you notice that psychometric assessment reports will use words like this candidate tends to, or may at times engage in, or is likely to. So it's a very neutral, non-judgmental language. Again, like I said earlier, there are no right or wrongs in psychometric assessments. So it is non-threatening to the individual. It does not put any kind of judgment on them. There are no bad profiles or good profiles. It certainly comes down to what are you going to use from that profile? What are your objectives? So again, going back to what's in it for you, you look at the unique selling proposition in terms of what that tool presents to your client. You look at the diverse range of tools, reports, criterias of selecting the reports that are out there, and there is something for everyone. There is just like what I call the Baskin-Robbins approach. There is a taste that, for everyone, for everybody, right? And you're bound to find something that your client could benefit from. Even people in sports coaching, right? There are certain tools that can benefit people in sports coaching in terms of internal motivation, dealing with challenges, raising stamina. So whoever your client is, regardless of what kind of background they come from, there is a tool out there that's going to benefit them. And another aspect that I personally feel it provides me with a great push, and this is what I was telling you about a little bit earlier, is that it really gives you a nice head start for the candidate. So rather than start from a pure blank slate, and yes, there are advantages of starting from a blank page. And this is why it's also important to understand, like I said, we need to understand what our objective is for the individual. But naturally, there's a financial concern on behalf of the candidate. There's a time constraint as well. So sometimes getting that head start is quite beneficial. So being able to actually pinpoint what the challenges are, and sometimes the challenges present themselves in terms of blind spots. Sometimes we go through candidates that aren't aware of a certain aspect of their personality being the source or one of the primary sources of the challenges that they face. So when we present them with, again, this unbiased, non-judgmental, scientifically validated report, it can really help you jump certain stages, certain number of coaching sessions that are spent into identifying what a person's real challenge is going to. Okay, so from experience over the past 9 years dealing with Hogan psychometric tools specifically, I found that this can be one of the most important factors that acts as a USP, a unique selling proposition for your candidates, and they really see the benefit of it. As soon as they see the report, they automatically start to understand, oh, hold on a second, this is explaining what my tendencies are, what my personality looks like, and it can actually explain why I behave in a certain way, why I might what we call derail or defunction in a certain place under stress, and how is that affecting my relationships, my marital stability, my occupational prospects, etc., etc. Okay, now, remember I said that there are different schools of thought when it comes to how personalities are approached. Under the Hogan personality tool specifically, we refer to this as what we call identity versus reputation. So let me give you an example here into what that actually means. So first of all, our identity is how we see ourselves, and our reputation is how others see us. Now, for the bulk of people, again, going back to that bell curve model, for the bulk of people, there is a large degree of congruence between how people see them and how they see themselves. So if you've ever heard somebody saying, or you yourself have said, you know what, I'm different between how I behave at work and how I behave at home, well, research actually shows that to a very large degree, that is not quite accurate. Okay? To a very large degree, that person's perception of who they are between work and life, there's a certain area of difference or divergence between how people see this person and how he sees himself or herself going from work to home or home. So research shows that there's a large degree, for most people, up to 85% approximately, of agreeableness between how people see us and how we see ourselves. Now, for some, there are certain differences. And research, and this is really the basis of the approach for Hogan here, is that research shows that success can depend more on how people view us rather than how we view ourselves. simply because the way that we see ourselves might actually be warped, might be different, might be influenced by various things that happen in our lives. So the amount of criticism versus positive feedback that we get, the amount of support, the culture that we live in, all of these, the educational system, the parental system, all of these are actually attributes that can have a drastic impact on how we see ourselves versus how others see us. So for the Middle Eastern, primarily Levant type backgrounds, people in the audience, you're going to be very familiar with this. I believe that people, I think, in the Mediterranean share this attribute in that it's not necessarily very polite to speak about your own accomplishments, right? So this is something that I again, please feel free to share if it's the same in your culture. In Lebanon, you know, it's not considered polite. You will be seen as a show-off. You will be seen as egotistical if you actually speak of your strengths, if you speak of your accomplishments. Well, you know that a lot of this is up to how you're raised, within your small family. It depends on your educational system. It depends on how your managers and your colleagues have interacted. But from a psychometric intent, it is important to actually be able to market yourself and to sell yourself. And in fact, that is considered an important trait in personality. So it's in these kinds of things that identity and reputation can actually make a difference. Plus, on another front, if we look at it again from the occupational perspective, and I completely understand if some of you are not executive coaches, but this will also relate to you as well, because some people will talk about themselves, will sell themselves in a manner that is not entirely accurate. So for example, let's say I'm actually interviewing somebody or coaching somebody, and I'm asking them about their preferred method of thinking styles, of organization, or planning. This person might actually describe themselves as the following. I'm a fun, spontaneous individual that looks forward to starting each day with a clean slate, ready to meet whatever challenges life has to offer. So take this from the coaching perspective. You're starting a relationship, a coaching relationship with an individual. You ask them to talk about themselves, to pinpoint their challenges. And let's say this person is not primarily very high in the self-awareness department, right? They might actually describe themselves in this manner. And all of those things are completely accurate, right? So assuming here that this person is not manipulating what he says or adding, exaggerating into what they say. No, this person truly believes that this is who they are, and they are, in fact, this type of description. Now, what the psychometric assessment can help you uncover is the opposite side of this same personality tendency. So that same personality tendency, that flexible, laissez-faire person who takes each day as a new challenge, doesn't really have a concrete plan as to where they want to go. They would rather keep it very flexible. That same personality actually has the following disadvantages. So individuals responding in a manner that provides them with that positive aspect, that positive side that this person has described themselves as. Hello, any questions? Okay, so that same person tends to be, notice the wording here, right? Tends to be inattentive to detail. They tend to resist supervision, ignore small step processes. They don't necessarily plan ahead. They really think about the consequences of their actions. So the person that is talking about themselves, that is engaging with you, within the capacity of you being a coach, might be totally convinced that their flexible nature is an advantage, and it is something that they are proud of, and it is something that they don't want to change. They enjoy being that flexible in nature, and they see it as purely an advantage. If there are any psychologists there, please correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe the term they use is scotoma, where a person sees what they want to see, right? So if a person is really convinced that that flexibility is a source of advantage, a source of strength, it's going to be much more challenging for you as a coach to be able to take them out of that bubble and make them understand that, hey, you know what, that flexibility is a great attribute. How does it work against you in certain occasions, right? So a psychometric assessment that sheds light on the reputation aspect can present both sides of the equation. So in terms of that tendency to be flexible versus be organized or be planned, rather, you can say, okay, based on what you do, this is how that flexibility helps you, and this is how that flexibility hinders you. For example, and by the way, for me personally, I am the extremely flexible person, right? So my score on that element under Hogan leans to an almost extreme state where I am so flexible to the extent that as that wording describes, I sometimes am so excited about an idea that I don't actually think it through all the way, right? So now this helps me in terms of being a strategist, but it works against me in terms of being a realist or a pragmatist, right? So when it comes to getting things done on the ground, I really need to have people around me who are more on the pragmatic, more on the operational side, that are going to pay attention to the small steps, to the small details that I might not necessarily pay attention. Okay, and this is really one of the examples of how psychometrics can really help you within your coaching perspectives. Is that they shine this spotlight that shows both the positives and the negatives of the person. Again, like I said, in a non-judgmental, non-biased, and very scientifically validated. Okay, does that make sense? All right, excellent. So again, like I said, depending on the tool that you're going to be using, that tool is actually going to shine light on various elements. Now, in the psychometrics world, there is generally 2 to 3 major types of reports that you are going to get, or types of assessments that you're going to get. So under Hogan, the tool that we utilize, and by the way, we are not just representatives of Hogan, so I'm not just trying to sell or push Hogan on you, right? It's just that it is the tool that I primarily use, especially for executive coaching, and it is really one of the most robust tools out there. But we do offer a variety of other tools as well, especially under the abilities aspect as well. So under Hogan, you will find that they have 3 types of assessments, and these assessments are pretty much universal regardless of where you come from. So the assessment type doesn't change, or the assessment questions don't change based on where you come from. So these types are called the HPI, the Hogan Performance Inventory, or Personality Inventory. And this is what we relate to as the positive fit, or the bright side of personality. So basically, in layman's terms, this is what's good about you, right? These are the nice things about you. What could be an advantage for you moving on? Again, whether we're talking occupationally or personally relational. As well, Hogan has done a lot of research into what they call the dark side of personality. And those are the personality tendencies that actually change within us, or are taken to such an extreme state that the way that they change will have a negative impact on our lives, on our relationships, our performance, our work, etc. So this is what they call in Hogan the Hogan Development Survey, the HDS. Now, these two are the most prevalent types that you will find in a lot of assessments. Some assessments focus more on the positive aspects. So there are some tools out there that only focus on what's positive about you. So one of them, for example, is called the Strengths Finder. This one relates more towards your talents and your abilities from a personality perspective, rather than what could be disadvantages from your personality aspect. So under Hogan, we look at both the positive and the negative side, or the dark side. Plus, Hogan also looks at your values. And this is what they call the motives, values, and preferences, MVPI. And basically, this means what is it that drives certain aspects of your behavior. So why do you actually behave the way that you behave, without looking at it from a therapeutic or a psychoanalysis perspective? Remember that we always focus on this as coaches. We don't want to psychoanalyze, right? We move, the primary difference between us and psychoanalysis is that we move forward. We don't look at the past. So with the MVPI, it's that look ahead that basically says, okay, based on what the report is saying to be the most strongest values that affect you, this is the kind of behavior you are likely to engage in, right? And these change all the time, all right? This is something as well that is also very critical and advantageous as well in psychometrics, is that nothing is set in stone when it comes to psychometrics. It's not like abilities. Your ability, unless you change it, you work on it, will almost remain the way it is, unless you do something to it. Well, with personality, it's a different story, because everything around us is actually contributing to our personalities changing, to our values changing, to our drivers and motivational aspects changing. So all of these criteria can actually change all over the place, depending on how significant these changes might be. So looking at these three aspects from the Hogan perspective, we're able to see this holistic view of the individual and really understand where they are right now, pose the right questions in terms of what kind of challenges they might observe, what kind of challenges might be a blind spot for them that they might not necessarily be aware of, what kind of internal motivators exist in terms of their will and their motivation to move forward. Some people will say, I don't necessarily understand why I need to work on this. So in that sense, the MVPI section can shed a lot of light on this. Christian is saying the Strengths Finder does a great job of mentioning potential blind spots. Yes, absolutely, the blind spots, but they don't necessarily show the dark side, right? So the dark side, which are the actual negatives of your personality. So rather than blind spots, which are elements that you might not necessarily be aware of, the dark side are elements that you might be aware of, but they actually have the negative impact. So for example, one of my negative high scores under the dark side is something called bold. And this refers to the amount of confidence, the amount of ego, the amount of force that I show in terms of selling myself, speaking, and doing what I do. Well, as a professional that is very confident in what I do, I find it very easy to actually overdo it sometimes. And that is what the dark side is about. It's about taking that element to an extreme state where overdoing it might actually cause a negative impact. But you're absolutely right. It is a great tool. One of the people that actually represents Strength Finder and Gallup in the Middle East was actually certified by Hogan, by me, a few years ago. So there is no best tool, right? Every tool has its unique advantages. You really need to identify what the purpose of using that psychometric tool is going to be, what specific type of clients do you have, and then you'll be able to look at the various tools that are out there. Now, most psychometrics will have standard assessment. Same goes with Hogan, same goes with StrengthsFinder. You usually get that same assessment, same questions. And what is different are the types of reports that you get. So with Hogan, there are approximately 24, 25 different reports. Some of them, we call it a report, but it's actually a report that consists of many sub-reports. So depending on your use, your objective, you need to understand which report you actually need. And this is where, at Phoenix, we can help you, we can work with you to understand which tool you can actually benefit from the most based on your unique understanding or unique situation and unique type of clients. So that's basically what Hogan represents in terms of the assessments. Now, part of the advantage of utilizing Hogan versus other tools specifically is that upon inception, upon the preparation of the research methodologies that Dr. Hogan put in place in order to conduct this psychometric assessment tool, it was originally intended as an occupational assessment, right? And again, this goes back to picking the right tool. So while, yes, we can use the Hogan reports to understand various elements relating to the personal day-to-day interaction of a client, the primary utilization of Hogan is geared towards occupational development rather than occupational coaching and development rather than personal development. So yes, you can use it for people who wish to set a certain goal for themselves on the personal front, right? The various elements in the report will help you understand various aspects of their personality that can definitely be used into coaching this person towards that specific goal. But primarily, Hogan is used in order to coach and develop people that wish to achieve a certain professional goal, a career aspiration, even a change of direction. It can really help you in that field. Okay? Any questions so far? Making sense? Okay, excellent. So let me just share with you a couple of what the reports look like under Hogan in order to understand what psychometrics generally look like. And again, the format of the reports, you'll find there's a lot of consistency between the different tools. So they usually present the reports into certain formats that are quite consistent. So let me first show you what the fields are for the various reports. So under the day-to-day aspect, the bright side aspect, the HPI, we actually look at 7 different criteria. So we look at 7 different criteria. These criteria are based on what is called the 5-factor model, which is one of the most solid personality theories from a psychological perspective. The 7 aspects that we look at are divided into 3 major fields, what we call energy and drive, relationships and communication style, and problem-solving style. So the 7 categories or the 7 scales under the bright side of personality will shed light on how you are likely to display that drive towards getting things done, your relationship building style, as well as your communication style, as well as how you think about challenges, how you deal with them, and how you learn. So that's HPI. With the dark side model, it's a little bit more comprehensive. There are actually 11 scales or 11 scores that we call derailers, because they derail you off your proper path. And if any of you have read the book Why CEOs Fail, right? It's one of those great CEO types managerial books, and that book is based almost verbatim on these 11 dysfunctions. So they are basically attributes that we either underutilize or overutilize that will actually cause us to derail. And then we have the MVPI, and these are 10 scales, 10 scores that are spread across 4 different categories. So we have what is called the status cluster, what motivates you, what drives your behavior in terms of identifying and setting your status within your organization, your sociable status, your sociability cluster, what is called the financial interests cluster, and your decision-making cluster. So again, it takes our values from a broad perspective to try and better understand its field. So those are the ones that people get assessed on. And like I said, the assessments are all the same, regardless of where you're from, what the purpose of your taking the assessment is. The reports are different. So let me show you some of the most popular reports that are actually used under Hogan. So one that is quite popular that a lot of people feel can provide them with a lot of benefit is a report that presents the individual with an outlook on their EQ tendencies or emotional intelligence tendencies. So this is what the report looks like. And it actually looks at EQ from 6 different perspectives. So we have awareness, regulation, expression. So these are more in terms of the self-awareness and self-management aspect of the standard emotional intelligence model. Then we have detection, influence, and empathy. And these relate more to the social awareness and relationship management aspect. And here, again, like I said, it gives you this unbiased view of what this person's tendencies are going to be within these 6 factors. And they can be a great starting point for people who wish to improve their emotional intelligence attributes. Another report that is also widely popular is something that we refer to as the high potential report. This one looks at your leadership potential from the prospect of 9 different attributes spread across 3 main pillars. So the 3 pillars that Hogan utilizes is what we call leadership foundations, which are basically how you lead yourself. Leadership emergence is how others perceive you as a leader, and leadership effectiveness, basically how effective are you in leading others and leading businesses. So the high potential model actually can shed light on the person's prospects into handling more executive, more senior leader type abilities. Another more general report, 2 reports actually, is what we call the insight report or the lead report. And these 2 depend on how senior are you. If you're more towards entry to mid-level seniority, you would do the insight report. If you're more towards executive seniority, you do the lead report. And these are more specific to the 3 different segments that we looked at. So the bright side of the personality, the dark side of personality, and your various motivators and drivers. And these will actually take each one of the scores under the respective fields and tell you basically what those scores actually imply. Now, one last thing to say about Hogan is that unlike a lot of tools out there, rather than place you in a box, Hogan can actually be used to dig and probe very, very deep into a person's prospect, depending on what area you're looking at and what objective you're trying to improve or execute. So when we're looking, for example, at a person's relationships, we can focus primarily on certain scores that will give us insights on this person's relationship style, whether from the bright side or the negative side or the motivators. But what's beautiful about Hogan is that when you start to combine scores and interpretations with each other, you start to get a much deeper analysis. The last report I'll show you is something that we call the flash report, which is basically just the scores, the raw scores of the assessment from the 3 different assessments that we've taken. So, like I said, these are the 3 different assessments, and this is the score of an individual. Now, you'll see that this particular sample is all on the low side. So one person might say, oh my God, this is going to be a very bad report. Not at all, right? It depends on what is it that you're actually looking at. So if I'm looking specifically at the relationship aspect of this individual, and this individual is engaged in coaching in order to achieve some kind of an improvement in the relationship, whether personally or professionally, I can look at the sociability score here, find that it's low, which indicates that this person enjoys either interacting with a smaller number of people or actually working on their own, which makes them great and independent in terms of their tasks, whereby that same attribute might be a disadvantage whenever they need to interact with others or be what we call socially proactive. Notice that we don't use the words introvert or extrovert, even if the score is on the low side. So rather than just restrict ourselves with that particular score under sociability, we can combine that score with other scores from different elements. So with that sociability score being on the low side, I can look at something else. For example, I can look at cautious, right? Which is in the dark area of personality. And cautious is about overdoing it when it comes to preparing your plan Bs, your contingency plans, reviewing your work, double checking it, making sure that things are correct, mostly in fear of being in error. So if I combine these 2 together, I can get an extended understanding of that person's relationship style. So this person with a very low sociability score and a very high cautious derailer score indicates to me that under stress, this person is less likely to go out and seek support and seek help when things start to go wrong. And rather than approach colleagues or approach managers because of that socially reactive nature that they have, they are likely to engage in reviewing the work over and over and over to make sure that it is correct, right? So I don't need to restrict myself with only one aspect of sociability, but rather that I can expand it to understand various scenarios, various needs and wants of the individual, and as such, tailor my coaching approach to that person's specific needs. Okay, and that's basically it. That's basically what I wanted to talk to you about today. So just a very quick understanding of the elements of psychometrics, on why that can actually push your coaching business forward, how it can help you, how it can actually help your clients, and ending it with a specific talk on. So anybody has any questions on anything that we have talked about or anything else that I might not have mentioned?
Feel free to raise your hand and ask for any question. I have a question.
Okay, I can. Oh, there, sorry.
So
My speakers were disconnected. Sorry about that.
no worries. Listen, I have a question. How, in simple words, how can assessment help coaches tailor their approach to their clients?
Excellent question. And this is really, I guess, the bulk of the what's in it for coaches aspect. Once coaches are able to look at the report, and like I said, shed light on what has been identified as areas of strengths, areas of challenges, values, drivers, etc., they can actually start to tailor the coaching journey based on the priorities that are both identified by the report as well as identified by the person. So it works both ways. It provides an advantage for the candidate to understand what their reality is, what their current situation is, and it provides an insight for the coach themselves to either rectify any kind of blind spots or misunderstandings or even exaggerations of a person's tendencies, and in many occasions are able to ask the challenging questions if a person is not able to see their individual reality.
Okay.
And speaking of the various customizable reports, there are reports as well that are specifically made for coaching. So there will be specific questions targeted at coaches that they can use with their candidates to try and get to the root cause of the challenge that they are trying to deal with.
Yeah, it's very interesting. I use assessments and they're very interesting and it shifts the relationship. We'll come back to you, Harriet. Let's go to Vinny to raise his hand and then we'll take Harriet's question.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Harriet. This session was very, very informative. A quick question. You mentioned that Hogan is one of the primary tools used when it comes to executive coaching, so CXOs. Can you suggest?
Occupational coaching in general, right?
So
not just executive. So there are reports that would fit all levels in the corporate level, but yes, it is primarily targeted at corporate development rather than personal development.
Sure, thanks. So just wanted to understand, are there any recommended tools? Because primarily I work with CXOs in the corporate world. Right. Hogan could be one of the tools. Any other tool which you recommend, probably which will suit this target group or these audience?
Honestly, I don't want to sound like I'm selling because I'm not, but I would only recommend Hogan. It is one of the best tools when it comes to that particular level of professionals. The amount of details that you get under the lead report, which, as I said, is for senior executives. There are various other reports. There's something called judgment, which is more about decision making and strategy. So it can give you a significant amount of insight for that CXO to actually understand where they are right now, what kind of challenges they are encountering, especially in relationship with the various CXO members, the board, and the stakeholders that they deal with. I would put my entire weight behind Hogan for that particular level. Anything else, I would say you have Savile, you have Strength Finder, you have SHL, but for that level, I would only recommend Hogan, nothing else.
No, thank you. One last question, a follow-up question. So as a coach, if I have to use this tool, do you need to get certified before using this tool, or if you can give some direction around that?
You need to be certified. So just to give you a very, very quick 20-second introduction of the certification process, it is basically a 2-day workshop, or if you're doing it online, it is 4 half days. It has a workshop module, e-learning module that you have to complete, and a post-workshop e-learning module that you have to complete, an assessment that you have to do offline that is open book, as well as a feedback that you engage in on in the live workshop, whether it is in person or virtual, and those are the criteria for being assessed. And you do it once, and that's it. You're assessed for life. You don't have to renew your assessment.
Thank you.
You're very welcome.
So the question we had was, can you give us a real life example of using an assessment in a coaching engagement?
Okay, so let me, since again, we have a mix of people who are both life coaches and executive coaches. So I'm going to give an example for both. So let me start with the executive coach, because this is primarily my areas. And like Vinny, this is mostly what I do in terms of coaching. I engage with CXOs, directors, executives. So let me start with one of the projects that I worked
Firas. Let's give him a second. And
the
Firas, you cut off.
yes, go ahead.
Firas, you cut off for like seconds. Can you
Okay,
please?
Yeah, let me just switch to a different internet. Okay, is it better now? Okay, so basically we were working with ministries in the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia to develop, first of all, identify and develop various competencies of deputy ministers to be able to handle the ministerial job duties in the future. So this was the succession planning project for these deputy ministers, where they were being prepped to handle and take over these minister duties. I used the Hogan Lead Series report. And by the way, for those of you who are in executive coaching as well, Benit, you might be aware of this, given your experience. Sometimes you also need additional assessment types in the field of executive coaching, right? So for example, for that level, we also presented them with strategic case studies, and they had to deliver a strategic analysis of it, doing role-playing scenarios and other types of assessments. But in terms of how Hogan was beneficial, we were able to target very, very quickly, given the fact that we were only with these people once, right? So we were there on the day of the assessment center, and we were giving them a very quick brief on the results, and identifying very quickly with them over the period of 1.5 to 2 hours what their main challenges are and how they see their way forward in terms of plotting their development journey. So for that particular project, these deputy ministers were able to really identify what is holding them back in terms of when they actually take on that minister's job, and be able to plot a course full with very concrete deadlines, very complete objectives. Some of the reports that we use, they even go ahead and suggest various developmental elements for you in terms of what you can do on the job rather than what kind of training you get. But that was one scenario where I was using the Hogan report. This was a big project that we had at Phoenix. Another thing that I do also on a regular basis, but not as extensively as I do with executive coaching, I take on various people who work individually in terms of developing themselves. One of my clients is an ex-director in Qatar. She was the director of the nursing department in the primary healthcare section of the Ministry of Health, and she was close to retiring, right? It was her last 6 months of retiring, and she wanted to work with a coach to identify what can she do once she retires. She feels that she still has a lot to give, but due to her age, she needs to retire from her governmental position. And she wants to engage into, she was looking more into becoming a mentor to other Qatari professionals. So the report basically gave us an insight into her communication style, her assertiveness levels, the types of pitfalls, the type of derailers that she might fall in. She has a very, very powerful personality. So it was a lot of fun to actually shed some light on her very assertive, slightly aggressive nature, and working with her to become more on the embracing side, since she's going to be working with a much younger population of her peers. So those two are very distinct in terms of really seeing the impact of the Hogan reports and psychometrics in general in terms of coaching. I hope I was able to shed some light here on how it has benefited me personally. Any other questions?
You can mute yourself if you want to ask something. You can mute yourself.
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And for those of you with no cameras, we'd love to see you as well.
I've mentioned this.
Always a challenge, you know, with virtual sessions.
Yeah. Anyone else would like to ask any questions, any clarification on anything that Firas covered? Stefanos.
In a long-term engagement, you know, if it goes, you know, for a few years, do you ever go back and redo? So you did it before it started, and then it's year 2 or 3. Do you go back and redo?
Great question. Great question. Thank you, Stefano. Absolutely. We recommend every 18 to 24 months. I personally do mine every 2 years, because that is a period that is consistent enough to allow for the person's changes to have taken place and settled down. So for example, when I coach people that are either between jobs or have less than a year, or I generally say 6 to 12 months in a job, I usually start with sort of a disclaimer to say, listen, due to this unstable position you're in right now, you're either in between jobs or you are discovering a new job, a lot of your personality tendencies might be affected by the situation that you're in. So there's a very strong possibility that where you are right now is going to change very, very quickly, right? So we usually allow for that personality assessment to stay for at least 12 to 18 months. And then, you know, we recommend that you redo them. So yes, for a long-term engagement, absolutely.
Thank you.
Absolutely. I myself, I do it every 2 years, and you'd be surprised some of the changes I've seen in myself. So sometimes my colleagues just find it very amusing how I switch from one side to the other, almost being bipolar.
That's very interesting. And this is the proof that coaching works effectively.
Oh,
because if you see changes in the report, especially in the derailers, then you know that it's working and you're moving somewhere. Anyone has any question for Firas that you would like? Harriet, go on.
I have another question. You mentioned derailers, which prompted, Hogan has a lot of derailers. I mean, it has more derailers than it has the bright side information.
Bright side, yes.
And from my accent, you can maybe hear I'm an American. So I come from a place where we give prizes to every school child. So it's positive, right. Positive, positive.
Right.
So I just wonder, but it's an American tool, based tool. Talk more about the number of derailers, which can be quite scary when somebody gets a report which has many very high reds.
Absolutely. And you mentioned a great point. And again, this goes back to what I was saying in terms of the various schools of thought, the various ideologies that are out there. But if you read various articles or watch videos of Dr. Hogan or speak with them personally, you'll find that the dark side is really his baby. It's his passion. And you're absolutely right. It shows in the number of derailers that we have. And in his own words, he basically says that these derailers can either make or break a person. And the way that the reports present these derailers, rather than looking at them from the prospect of you either engage in this or not, they look at it from a risk perspective. So the higher the score that you achieve, or you score, not you achieve, you score in these derailers, the higher the risk that this derailer could actually take place, and the higher the impact of it on your relationships and on your performance when it does actually take place. So let me mention myself as an example. First of all, there are three segments of derailers under the dark side. There is what we call moving away from people, which are derailers that are likely to create more distance between you and others. There are moving against derailers, which are derailers that are likely to cause friction between you and others. And there are what we call moving towards people derailers, which are derailers where your assertiveness is likely to be impacted to the extent that it will result in a negative behavior. All four attributes under the moving against people derailers are in the extremely high risk zone for myself. They are in the high 90s, right? We're talking 98 and 99s, right? So this basically says that the four derailers are bold. I already told you one of them. The other one is called colorful, which means that my charismatic personality could overcome and overshadow others in an organization. Mischievous, which is my creative and impulsive nature taking precedence to an extent where I might manipulate others. And the fourth one is imaginative. Again, also high for me, in which your ideas might actually be a bit too on the eccentric side. So despite the fact that over the past 9 years, I've consistently held in the 90s scores under these four derailers, I continue to be a success, right? Now, some people might argue against that. I understand. That's my bold nature coming out. But basically, it's a unique enough element to say it is not an indication of or an assurance of failure. It is basically where you are likely to derail when things actually do go wrong, right? So, for example, my bold character might actually come out inadvertently if I'm in a position where I'm in competition with somebody else. So if I'm trying to oversell my services or appear to be unique in terms of the services that I offer, whether as a trainer or as a coach or as an assessor, my bold nature might actually come out. Now, what I need to be aware of the various risks that are involved from that bold character actually coming out. So how much do I weigh appearing very confident and very capable versus appearing to be arrogant and having what they refer to in Hogan terminology, fantasized talent about what I'm able to accomplish, right? And I do remember in my younger years, and not just my younger years, I constantly have to remind myself of this particular nature every once in a while. There are certain things I'm not particularly capable of, right? And I do have to remind myself every once in a while of that fact. I take great pride in the level of work that I do, but I have to acknowledge that there are certain elements that need to be left to the respective people. So, for example, I do say that I'm not the business development type guru that can go and knock on doors and cold call people and do cold calling and cold selling, right? I am more than capable of delivering a very strong and influential presentation regarding the services and the products that I offer. But when it comes to actually doing the groundwork prior to that meeting, it's not my forte. And I have tried, right? Now, realizing that can actually, and this is great from a coaching perspective, if I can see that in my report, for a person, let's say, take for example, a person that wants to engage in selling their own services as a coach rather than hiring somebody that will do that for them. If they can actually read that, again, in an unbiased and non-judgmental report, it can give them a very good wake-up call. And for a coach that doesn't really know this person, they might spend a lot of time working with this individual on developing their assertiveness, developing their goal orientation, their commitment, their structured approach towards selling their services and setting up meetings and maintaining their stamina. But at the end of the day, you're swimming against the current that exists within the individual. So if I'm able to highlight that right from the get-go to that individual and say, listen, according to your current state, to your current personality tendencies, this does not appear to be one of your fortes. So you need to make a decision. Do you want to spend all of this time and effort developing this particular aspect, developing this particular goal, and risking, not being able to be completely effective in it, versus focusing on something that you already have the groundwork, the foundation in terms of your personality criteria, and working on it to make it an exceptional and unique attribute that you're able to market for. So again, this is how a coach can actually pinpoint and help the person determine what their priorities are. But you're absolutely right, Harriet. Given the Western culture, and by the way, I spent almost half of my life in Canada, so I'm quite familiar with the North American culture as well. That positive re-encouragement of everything. If you're 10th place, you still get an A for effort. And we're starting to notice the impact of that with the current generation. But great question.
That's a different conversation, but thank you for that
and by the way, it's a great tool as well, psychometrics in general and Hogan in specific, to use in terms of generational gaps, because here we look at the MVPI section, the values section, and the motivators, because it can really understand how motivators can be different from one age group, from one generation to the other, while pretty much having very similar attributes, whether from the bright side or the dark side. Great question. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? No more questions?
Well, allow me to say that if you do remember anything else, or you do come across something that you'd like to know more about, I would be more than happy to actually be at your service. My colleagues, some of my colleagues here are also in attendance. Samar Khouri, Stafi Rahmi, Rosine, I just like to call your names, ladies, I love you. So we are all at your service. Just please feel free to reach out to us. I'll put my email onto the
please put
box.
your email so people can reach out to you, Firas, if they have any questions afterwards.
Absolutely. I'll be more than happy to either myself or one of my fellow consultants as well spend more time with you, perhaps even discussing things that are very specific to your needs. That way we can look at the prospect of you utilizing and being certified, the types of reports that you might be looking at, whether it is the right tool for your candidates or not. And as well, if we determine that it is not the right tool, as I said, we do have several other tools that we can actually talk about.
Definitely. So feel free to reach out. Are there any questions before we close? And I would like to tell you something. No more questions. So, okay, first I would like to thank you, Firas, and the team for this enlightening webinar, as we say. It was full of information, and I think all the coaches have food for thoughts and will think about it. For everyone who attended fully the seminar, the webinar, you will be receiving your certificate, CCE certificates within the next week, okay? And I'm going to put the same message on the chat. If you do not receive the certificate, please reach out to ICF Cyprus training@gmail.com, and we will make sure to send you your certificate. And if you have any questions, also send them to Firas and the team. And don't forget to follow us on social media to stay informed about all the ICF Cyprus webinars that we're bringing to you. And really thank you, each one of you, for the interaction, for the feedback, and for the questions that you asked, because it sheds more light to our presentation. And again, thank you, Firas, for this. This presentation will be put on our social media as well. It is on our YouTube channel. It will be uploaded on our YouTube channel, and you can also watch the previous webinar that we did and the future webinars.
Absolutely.
So thank you.
And just one last thing, since you mentioned CCE credits, if you do get the certification, you do get credits towards your ICF.
Yes, very important point. Yes, yes.
And Steph, yes, thank you. There is also a special rate for ICF coaches of 15% on the certification. So this is a partnership that exists between ICF and Google.
Yeah. ICF Global, not only ICF Cyprus, it's between the global scale.
Global ICF,
yes. So thank you very much, and see you in our next webinar.
Inshallah. Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.